Well, thank you all for being here. We're excited to have some distinguished gentlemen with us today. And state board. And state board. We have Jim McNeese and Jim Porter, both state board members, and they represent parts of our...
Just say Jim, you'll get it right.
Yeah, Jim and Jim.
I'm the other Jim.
And our road warrior, commissioner of education, advocate for students and educators everywhere. So I just invite them to come up and say hi. So thanks for being here.
How's everyone doing?
Good.
Good. It's almost the end of February, so everyone's looking forward to spring break. But we'll knock on wood, and we'll hope that we've dodged the worst of the weather. Well, there could have been some major snowstorms in Kansas this year if the temperature would have been about 2 or 3 degrees the other way, right? Including this week. We had some of that, but most of it was rain. So we'll bring you up to date on a few things, but we'd really like to just be interchangeable, and you can ask us questions, things on your mind, because sometimes I think we forget because we are locked into whatever's on our mind at the moment, which some of that we maybe can't even talk about because we use words that shouldn't be appropriate in front of an audience. That would be part of the legislative part of it. So let's talk a little bit about dyslexia, you don't mind. As you know, and Jim led the initial group on dyslexia. The state board's been pretty adamant over the last several years that legislation should not occur in areas that are constitutionally under the domain of the state board. What's really interesting and really hard, even though we're now early 70s, so we're almost 50 years from the time the state board was created and the constitutional duties were created. That was actually done in the 60s, but it was early 70s when it all came together. The legislature in Kansas still feels that they want to intrude upon that constitutional right. And I think it's because most other states, that's the way it operates. And so they go to conferences and they say, you just ought to pass these laws and you ought to do these things, and that's not the way it works in Kansas. So Jim Porter led dyslexia, and we put together a task force, which then had an implementation group of educators, professors, advocates for dyslexia all across the board. And we think we have a pretty good plan. Now that plan entails a lot of change. And quite honestly, the change is because for too many years, too many of our staff across the state did not know the science of reading. And I say that because that's only become really clear. I say clear, very solidified with all the groups within the last few years. So, long story, we can go over a lot of that, and Jim can certainly talk about the process of that. It'll be 6 hours of training that all pre-K, I know it's K through 5, some of you may know these details better than me. Pre-K through, elementary, so elementary certified, language arts, and teachers in special ed. And then there'll be some annual after that, but that initial 6 hours. There's also a large component on the people coming out of school. So with that, Jim, do you want to add anything? Because you really spent countless hours on this.
So there are two major issues. First of all, we need to make sure that the people that are being trained currently in school systems, that are currently in the pipeline, actually understand the science of reading. We discovered, I visited with a lot of elementary teachers, and I asked each one of them, my research is not very scientific, but I asked each elementary teacher, about how many kids in your class struggle with reading? And that is usually 25 to 30%, except when I was talking to teachers that had been nominated for Teacher of the Year. And in every case, their number was higher than that. So we're talking about 30 or 40%. Now, 30 or 40% of the kids don't have dyslexia. but for some reason, 30 or 40% of the kids have some kind of struggle in their reading. And the science of reading and structured literacy, which is using a small structured literacy instead of a particular program, deals effectively with most of those kids. And so we have not been teaching teachers how to do that. It's not their fault. They haven't been taught how to do that. And so we have to bring the colleges, universities in line, and they are coming. They typically, are any of you college professors in here? They move at the speed of a slug. And sometimes, but because of our system, where we approve their programs, they're going to have to move faster than that. And then we're concerned about, I'm concerned about the professional development, and everybody needs professional development, but I talk to teachers who have no idea what I'm talking about. And I talk to teachers that have gone through the entire Orton-Gillingham program and know a whole lot about it. And we need to make sure that our professional development is designed to meet the needs of where that teacher is, so that it's not one size fits all. When I talk about one size fits all, I'm going to give you an example that all of you look forward to every year, and that's bloodborne pathogens. It can't be that kind of training. It has to be training that meets the needs of it. So we're looking at screening and evaluation. We're looking at and screening is simple, and it can be free, and it can be something that the classroom teacher does in 5 minutes. So that's not a major issue. Evaluation is. And we're asking for funding for that. And we are, and so then we want to make sure that pre-service teachers are trained and the others are trained, because it does make a difference. And I think this is going to be a paradigm shift in the way that we reading. It's going to make a huge difference. If we, in fact, believe what we say, that we want to lead the world with the success of each, and each is a very deliberate term, student. So I'll answer any questions you have, but I've probably exceeded my knowledge.
I want to make sure that you understand, when we say structured literacy, companies use that as if it's a trademark term. We are not. We're using it as a generic term. And companies I know are calling throughout Kansas saying, well, you have to buy our product. That's not true. There's not one curricular product for that. But there are some curriculum products that do not teach structured literacy, and those have been used across the state too for a number of years. So.
Yeah, one other point. Whenever I want to reemphasize that we are not endorsing a product. The first day it was announced that I was going to chair that committee, I got 6 calls from 6 vendors wanting to sell the product. I didn't even know who the members of the committee were yet. We had never met. We had not scheduled a meeting. And basically all of them were, we're not in this to make you rich. We're in this to make a difference for kids. And so we are not endorsing a product. And if anybody tells you they are, then they're not telling you the truth.
It's your decision. Questions about dyslexia? Where we're going with that? Jump to the other one that's coming. Oh, okay. Computer science is, the board just approved computer science. Probably one of the fastest growing large sector employment opportunities of really good paying jobs is this, you can do cybersecurity, computer science, but it's this sector both in the Wichita, greater Wichita area and northeast Kansas in particular. And so the major companies of Cerner and Spirit and Cargill and many, many others are begging for more trained people. So the state board did adopt that computer science could be used as a core graduation requirement. Now what the state board hasn't done yet is decide what should that be in place of. 48 states have it in place of science and or math and or a foreign language. So I think they'd probably Jim and Jim would welcome your feedback. But so right now the recommendation may be leaning towards science, but I know at least the board chair, Kathy Bush, who has a little science background, is saying, well, it seems like it's more of a math credit. And again, every state looks at it differently. So And then there's some training with that. You don't have to offer it, by the way the state board did it. I mean, you can still say, well, we just can't do it, so it's not mandated. But if you do, it has to be allowed as a core credit. And then there will be some training, and I think the private industry is going to make most of the money, give most of the money for the training. So organizations like code.org, Apple, Microsoft, even some local entities will give training. So as you know, some of that in the elementary grades, the coding can be done well without computers, and it's more of a computational thinking. The state board also is going to have to identify what course at the high school would be the type of course, or the standards of the type of course that when a kid took that could be used as a math, science, or credit. Did I leave anything out on that?
Yes, on the keyboard you won't count.
That's right.
Well, I just add that the Regents threw us a curveball recently when they basically said that in the next few years they're going to alter, and I can't get into I don't know all the specifics of that, but basically the Regents curriculum, which is the core base of our graduation requirements, is changing. You know, and then you put the computer expectations in there, and then you take the redesign that we're looking at, and you take the accreditation, KISA, and you put all those pieces together, and it's like, what are we going to look like in 4 years? You know, and you have a bigger say in that, but at the same time, Randy is right, the board did go ahead and say, we're going to work on computer requirements, something's going to happen. And again, you know, how do we as a board say to you, you've got more control over what you can do, and then we tell you what to do with that new control? So there's going to be a lot of friction here. The legislature will be involved, and you know, they don't know this happened yet, so they usually wait till after some crisis, and then they'll get involved. You know, but
Mess it up.
yeah, you think about it. And so there's a real challenge. You know, and everyone in this room is going to be part of that solution. You know, it's just not going to be left up to us. So your voice is really important, but not just your voice, but the decisions you make at your local district.
So what Jim's saying, and this kind of applies to everything, and we know that you're heavily involved in redesign. You know, the state requirements for graduation are 21 credits. There's always been the Kansas Board of Regents qualified admissions, and you had to teach that or afford that curriculum to any student. And what that became is the de facto for most high schools became that curriculum to some extent. So the 21 credits, but for quite a while, and with an emphasis in the last few years, it doesn't say you have to, so it says 3 units of mathematics, social studies, science, 4 units of English language arts, has a speech component. And then it has some clock hours tied to it, or you can hit the competencies thereof. And we have very few school districts really are all in on the competencies. Now Wichita is trying to scale that as we speak, but we would welcome that. That's why, as Jim said, the tension is, we say computer science, well, if you can identify the competencies and students have those, then seat time becomes irrelevant, but you want to make sure your staff validate that and school boards validate that. So I think they're still going to wrestle with the computer science part of it. Does that raise questions? Yes.
It does raise a question for me. Kent Tampson, Director of Technology and Operations.
There's always one.
They'll either pat me on the back or kick me out. So, in my mind, and in discussing with our professionals in the district here too, there's 2 pieces to that. While you're focusing quite a bit on graduation requirements, and that needs to happen, to be honest with you, this opens an avenue to develop interest in those areas in the earlier grades. Because if we just offer the course changes at the high school, that's not going to help the employment option very much.
Right.
But providing some direction to the middle school and the elementary grades, absolutely key. The other piece I would say, the committee did a great job on the computer science standards, because not only are they well-written and defined, but they also take into account other practices and organizations that districts have followed for years, ISTE standards, other organizations around that, the library media programs and so forth. And so it allows us quite a bit of flexibility there. But we're going to be targeting earlier grades for sure, as well as the requirement.
Thank you, and we would too, and a lot of people now will jump to say, well, we want to limit screen time for those young kids. You can do most of this without any screen time in the early grades, and there's low-cost ways to do it, and there's high-cost ways to do it.
Sure.
You know, we were at Goddard last night, and they are heavily in Project Lead the Way. Excellent program. It's expensive. So there's almost no cost options to, we'll maybe use that as a high cost option. But I appreciate that, because we would love to see, and all of you know, more STEAM activities integrated, you know, and as I travel, I'm seeing a lot of that, from it's just integrated in the classroom to it's a special, where, you know, they're actually using that as a special. And some have actually looked at, you know, how the library services fit into that with makerspace, and you're seeing all that stuff somewhat kind of morph and merge, and it's unclear how that's all going to look. Every district's making it look a little different, but that could be if you talk to Commerce and you talk to the economists that look at Kansas, that could really alter the direction of the Kansas economy for the next, well, foreseeable future, 10 and 20 years, if we could raise the number of students that have computational coding type thinking. So for example, HVAC, you know, if something goes wrong with your heating, cooling, all that's going to require primary coding where they have to go in and recode things. Because just like automobiles, everything is computerized, and so it's not mechanically orientated now. I mean, certainly the compressor is on an air conditioner, but what's controlling that is all going to have to be reprogrammed. That's at a tech level. That's not at a college level. And then everything in between. So.
All I can tell you is this. The last several days, been on the road doing stuff, you know, and I have used my phone and my computer to solve a refrigerator problem, a vacuum problem, and learning how to seal bricks so they don't leak. You know, all on a computer. You know, we're connecting to other people and resources, whether it's YouTube or direct contact with a vendor, you know. And when I started, all I knew is I had a computer and a screen, and let's go do it. You know, so it's heavily in our futures, obviously. Everybody knows that. But here's the other thing I'd share with you. Dyslexia, you know, whatever, you just name the topic. And there are factions all there, supporting it over here, over there. So when we say, well, you know, we're going to take that computer recommendations, they're really good. The math people, the science people, they haven't thought that's really good. That's not too cool. You know, so they're kind of like, wait a minute, what are you doing? You know, there isn't an issue out there that there aren't multiple sides to. You know, and it's been very interesting, you know, to see them. So it's fun.
So,
You know.
so change is hard, and what Jim's saying, the traditional science, math, or well, what about the traditional science and math? So, you know, we're just going to have to look at that. Let me jump right in the middle of change, and then let's just open it up for anything you want to talk about, because there can be lots of topics, from stop arm safety to at-risk funding, if you want to talk about that. CTE courses. So everyone, of course, Senate Bill 155 made that very affordable for students, especially if you're close to somewhere of higher ed that can provide that for you. But there's a little bit of a disconnect between high-wage, high-demand jobs in Kansas and where our CTE programs primarily are aligned. So I'm going to step on a lot of toes here when I say this, because it's universal, and it's not criticizing anyone. If you look at the high-wage, high-demand areas, there are about 6 sectors in Kansas. We mentioned computer science, technology, agriculture, agriculture-related fields, education, financial. Kansas is a huge financial market. I'm going to miss some of these. Healthcare, obviously.
Senior healthcare.
And that's going to continue to grow as baby boomers continue to get older and need care. What is not high-wage, high-demand, critical need in Kansas is culinary arts and hospitality and tourism. Just isn't. And when we say that, it's that you go to a program, you go to some kind of formal schooling for it, you get out and you make somewhere between $15 and $22 an hour. There's that market in Kansas is extremely limited. But I see a lot of great culinary art programs. And tons of kids, right, running these really great programs. But if you look at the job market in Kansas, it's really just not there. Now, that doesn't mean there's not going to be 1 or 2 working, at a country club or a really high-scale restaurant, but it isn't there very much. And so, that's just a disconnect. We're getting more and more education programs. Be a teacher, we like that. That's obviously everyone's looking for great teachers. Healthcare, if you're just going to look at the major ones, run a health science pathway, and then there's many options to that. Scale that up, whatever. When a kid says, I want to be in healthcare, it doesn't matter whether it's on the dental side, the medical side, the nursing side, the physical therapy side. The answer is yes. We need all that, and we will continue to need all that. Machining, welding, plumbing, electrician, all those trades, high in need. And then, we still need baccalaureate, master's, PhD people in physics and chemistry and everything. So just take a look at your CTE programs and ask the question, in South Central Kansas, what's the demand for that? We can give you that data. What's the projection for that field? So one of the big arguments we have with the Kansas Chamber of Commerce, or the Kansas Chamber, is what should barbers and cosmetologists go to school for? And I don't know if you know this. If you want to be a barber in Kansas, or you want to go to cosmetology school, you go to school almost 4 times as many hours as an EMT. So I just want you to think about that next time that you're getting your nails done or someone's clipping your hair. There's some talk about why is that? What's the return on investment for that? Because if you don't own that shop, the return's pretty low, and the turnover is very high. And so maybe we move those type of programs to apprenticeship type programs, where the cost comes down, you still can do it, but you don't have to go 1,400 hours when you only have to go 300 and some hours to be an EMT. So that what we get asked all the time is, so I can't save anyone's life, but I can paint your nails. It's an interesting discussion, right? It's how we're looking at training versus return on investment. So, all right.
And that may be different in other states. Other states do not require nearly that amount.
Right.
So,
yeah. So just some discussion. Yes?
I'm Ron Sarnicki, Director of Special Education. And dyslexia. We've been training teachers for 10 years. This will be our 11th year to train teachers. Primarily special education teachers, but it's open to all teachers, the training is. And it's a 2-week period every summer, 8 hours a day. And so it's very intense, very involved. We bring kids in, they practice on the kids, and we tell the kids that when they come in, that they're helping our teachers become better, so we're watching our teachers, not them. And so they get a certificate, and it takes 3 summers to be actually licensed, a multi-sensory approach to teaching reading and stuff. It's based on the International Dyslexia Association standards. Okay? So we already have a lot of people who know what they're doing in this area. how will that translate when you come in with the requirements for training and stuff, if people already know what they're doing?
I don't know that I know the answer to that.
Well, I would say we're gonna take that into consideration. There's no reason to have them go back through it. So, first thing we have to do is hire someone to be in charge of dyslexia. We have Cindy Haddocky kind of, we say doing it part-time. She would say, what? I'm not doing that part-time. But there's no reason, if you've already trained people in that and you've been doing it, that those people shouldn't have that training count. Again, that comes back, as Jim said, to personalizing the experience for what needs to occur.
And I like what you said about it's open to all, because a lot of this is going to be taken care of in the regular education classroom before it gets to special education. It's a spectrum like everybody else, like everything else. And if we can use the science of reading in those early grades, or preschool and early grades, then we're going to eliminate a lot of that need for special education later on.
Absolutely.
And that's exactly what we want to do.
Well, this is a message that I've given to staff in the 30 years I was doing this business. You know, it's great that you're ahead of the curve. You know, and sometimes when you're ahead of the curve, you gotta realize that you've got a responsibility now to help the curve move. And sometimes you just have to do stuff that maybe you've already done for the good of the cause, as opposed to, I don't need to do this, you know, you guys need to do it. You know, that participation really helps. They can be advocates in their own district as well as others, but you know, we're moving everybody forward. And sometimes the leaders have to kind of be the cheerleaders and get in there and do it, even though maybe they've done it already. You know, rather than just saying it's validated, but you know, if they have certificates or some way they can validate what you guys have done. But you know, being a building principal, I used to say, well, people would say, I don't need to do this, I've already done it. Well, you know, you could really help us all move forward. You know,
And
sometimes it's part of leadership and it's part of commitment to help everybody do that. You know, get on the same page.
And the people that you've already trained are excellent cadre for those that aren't trained.
Right.
They can be, I mean, that would count. It's,
Same thing for letters training that has been provided for years. There's people that have help.
And I find people who are in it,
Anyway.
done it, done reading, you know, any kind of reading, that they're excited to help everybody else move. So it's not like, you know, they don't want to do it. You know, yeah, my first experience was in the 1970s. I took a reading class at WSU, and I took it because, well, we had to take a class, and it was the one that was open on Tuesday night. You know, and I was open to a whole new world in the 70s, and dyslexia, we just talked about that a little, but just reading, just how we process that, how it's about how the eyes work and how the brain functions, you know. And I took, I think 9 hours and was going to get a master's in it, but then I was a football coach and moved, and next thing you know, you don't have access to it. It was really exciting. It's very, and it's always been kind of a passion of mine.
Well, I'm excited that the undergraduate possibility of people having some pre-service training, because I've talked with colleges and universities through the years, and they say, it's not our responsibility to teach teachers how to teach reading, writing, and spelling. That's what they tell me. That's what they tell me,
Oh, I've
which
heard
makes me really sad.
Well, then what is our purpose?
Right.
Right, at the early grades, right, especially.
Two questions, Eric Flavin, CNN. High school principal. High school principal. One, do you know when the computer science determination of what course it will replace will be made?
This spring.
This spring, okay. And
Yeah,
then
but you'll already start your master class schedule enrollment, so don't worry.
yeah, we're good.
We'll mess with you.
And then the second one is, I would love to see the data. I think, like, just from the CTE perspective, you just said education, and that may be where I'm lacking with CTE courses. So I would love to see that data to see what we need to do educationally to start preparing students who want to be teachers.
Yeah,
So if you have that, I would love to see that.
okay.
he's got it.
Yeah, we can get that. There's some really cool programs where they're,
Yes.
I think of Ottawa. Their pre-K in Ottawa is actually in their high school. And so next door to their teacher prep program. So every hour they have a large teacher they have the teachers, or kids that want to be teachers, starting as sophomores, go in and observe. The juniors are actually instructing, and the seniors are project managing and organizing, and it's literally one-on-one with, and so they have a waiting list for wanting to get into the pre-K, because in Ottawa, it's like, this is the place you want your kid. But that's an example of, you know, how they're trying to do it. We also have some examples where some businesses in town, and what I'm thinking of is a bank, they're scholarshiping your top kids to go to college to be a teacher and come back to your community and for 5 years teaching, and they wipe out the debt. And so there's many ways to think about this, that just getting into the early parts of it. But healthcare, education, ag-related, you know, not so much production ag, but all the ag-related things. And then the trades, I'll fall short, but we'll get that to you. Other things, anything on your mind, anything that you're worried about? Yes.
Add another thing from a technology perspective. I know you're probably going to go visit the Kansas Teacher of the Year classroom.
Uh-huh.
And you know that we're very strong in early childhood and preschool here. So the E-rate program that provides discounts for technology, fantastic for our district, $100,000 a year in discounts that help us. We have a standalone early learning center with 150, 200 students. We have the standalone preschool classroom at Cumbernauld. We cannot use any E-rate dollars for those students to qualify because those are standalone buildings. It has nothing to do with at the federal level. It has to do at the legislative and state board level. If those students were in an existing building with other grades, we could count them. Standalone, we cannot. And so what that means to us,
Your pre-K program is located in?
separate buildings.
And it's in with seniors? No, it's
No,
just.
so the one classroom is,
Okay.
the other one is district-owned facility. We cannot use that student count for any E-rate qualification. If we would have one student that was a different grade level, we then could count everybody.
Hold them back.
It's kind of hard to hold one back.
Pick a volunteer.
And you're saying that's a state level?
That's a state
Feds
level.
are okay?
That's a state level.
Okay,
Didn't know that. Thank you.
And would not cost the state anything,
right, yeah.
but would, and I'm sure we're not the only district.
Yeah, thank you. We'll
Yeah.
go back and I'll call Amanda and Dale between here and our city, actually.
And I would appreciate that. I mean,
Yeah, thanks.
it means to us that we could, in our case with the Early Learning Center, utilize $26,000 to provide wireless, to provide technology access and so forth. Otherwise, that's out of the district's general fund.
Yeah, I didn't know that, so.
Excellent.
Well, that's kind of the change we're going through as we focus more on pre-K. You know, before it used to be, you know, we just had half-day kindergarten. You know, even counting them was only half, you know. And so, yeah, it's that change, it's a holdover from the past that we just didn't know about.
Same thing if you run daycare,
Yeah.
you have 3 different agencies certify the width of your doorway.
Right.
We're working on that too slowly, but the governor has indicated that she wants those fixed if you're running them as a school. So.
Now, I wouldn't expect a change in the next, 24 hours. I mean, but we can start the ball rolling.
Yeah, anything that,
Yeah.
it doesn't affect anyone for this year because
Sure.
you would have to change that earlier. But again, something that affects us because now we could utilize those dollars to
Sure.
support other programs. So thank you for listening, appreciate it.
Thanks for
How many of you are school board members? Any of you? I want to thank you and tell you that your job is harder than ours.
That's why you get paid more.
I drove 92 miles to get here this morning, and this is just the end of my district, and it's further on the other side. If we make a decision, I'm not gonna be accosted in the grocery store. or at church. And you may be, because we all make difficult decisions, and we all make decisions that sometimes are not popular. So I really admire people that stand up and take this on a local level, because it's a hard job, and it's a thankless job. I appreciate you doing that. And it's easier than ours. I mean, ours is easier than yours.
And he's survived a long time. I mean, he's, as long as I've been here, how many years have you been on the board, Lyle?
Wow, we're talking,
Yeah.
15.
That's it, yeah.
Thank you. Sarah, thank you for this. Surely you have some other things that are burning on your mind and we'll talk about. We appreciate all the things you brought up.
Well, I mean, the funding is always an issue, but that's.
Funding is settled with the exception of special ed.
Right.
And to give you just a quick snapshot, so there's about $90 million more coming into general education over the next couple of years. When the new school funding formula though went into effect, the legislature only appropriated about $7 to $9 million a year to go into special ed. So what's happening, for you to understand, you know well, on the special ed side, there's two things that are happening. As general ed gets more money, you're putting that a lot into salaries, and that's increasing salaries, which obviously increase special ed salaries. Coupled with, if you look at it, Nathan looks at this as at a district level, and there's a need, because I used to do this in McPherson around the co-op, and say, oh my gosh, we got this heavy caseload and X, and we have a need, and we can't find a teacher or that. We could add a para, and I look at the budget of that, and it's like, it doesn't cost me anything to add a para, like health insurance. Well, everyone does that across the state, and what happens is the amount of staff are going up, 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 the amount of salaries are going up, up, up. Categorical aid's not growing fast enough to keep up with that, and so then you're having to transfer out of your general fund to make up the difference. And that's hurting everyone, and that's, you're feeling that, and so interlocals and co-ops are like at odds with each other, like, why am I giving all the money to special ed? We hope, gonna knock on wood, we hope that they'll appropriate $20, $25, $30 million. It's there, and the reason it's there, our budget projections, Kansas went flat in enrollment this year. And we budgeted about a 2 or 3% increase in the budget last year that we didn't use, about $30 million. So that money's sitting there that could be used to go to special ed, which would then reduce the amount of money you're going to have to transfer next year. Because 92% excess cost is about 75, soon to be about 72, and it's going to continue to come down because, again, there's more money going into the regular ed side than there is the special ed side. Does that make sense? So you know this so well. I'm just trying to give you kind of the easier version of it.
One of the things for the state board members, one of the things that the many legislators don't understand is that there's a lot more students coming to school from trauma backgrounds now, okay? And a lot more of these qualify and are eligible for special education services. That also drives up the cost.
So the solution that many legislators come with, and I would just tell you, just quickly, I can't tell you to go out and politic as part of your job, but the votes in the legislature make a difference. Your representative makes a difference. And so Ed was here representing you guys, and there's not a person up there representing you with the enthusiasm and the voice that Ed had.
Right.
So, yeah. So, yeah, it's important to do.
But make a phone call in the next 15 days or at the next coffee and say, we gotta have that funding.
Yeah.
Because special ed, there'll be the money for special ed because you'll transfer the money. Where that money's coming from is everyone else, and as the needs of special ed, so
There's some unnamed legislators in part of my area and Jim's, who, it's a parent's fault. If they had better parents, we'd be better, and the solution is if we had private schools.
that's true.
That's their solution, even for special ed.
Wow.
But They're not so hot on special
Well,
ed.
here's a story for you.
Well, Ron, sorry,
I'm sorry. I'm not.
because we have students.
Oh, waiting, yeah, sorry.
That's all right.
And so my worry is get political and, you know, and there are people who, you know, and quite frankly, there are people in the legislature who believe they're speaking for you and for the state of Kansas, in the sense that public schools are failing, and, you know, we're not doing a good job. So, you know, the best thing to do would be to have private schools and charter schools and just go.
And I will say,
I'm
get
sorry.
involved politically, you know, I'll be very blunt. We need, if we're gonna protect our students, we need people in the legislature that support our students.
Get into one again.
And school personnel traditionally are not very active in
Get them
voting,
off the board.
and so that we get what we deserve if we're not active.
Thank all of you, thank you.
Thank you for
all
what
the
you
work
do.
that you do
Thank
every
you.
day.
Yes, thank
Especially, well, all of you. We'll get some information. All right, we have some kids waiting for us.
At the high school.
Not that you guys aren't important, but you know.
Thank you, everybody.
Yes, thank you very much.